Well, hey there, it's Brian Goulet here of GouletPens.com, and this is episode number 95 of Goulet Q&A, my weekly question and answer long-form video session. Well, you know what it is by now. Geez, I've done 95 of these things. Let's see here. Today is September 18th of 2015, and I'll just go ahead and cover some brief kind of update stuff on GouletPens.com before I get into the questions. First off, Rachel and I, this is just on a personal note, but we joined our church choir finally after several years. We've been thinking about it. We tried a couple years ago, but we had two really young kids. Now we just have two kind of young kids, so they're somewhat manageable. My mom's going to help watch them while we're in the choir. Rachel and I actually met singing, and we haven't had a lot of opportunity to sing together in a choir since we've graduated school and started a business and had kids. So we have not really been able to prioritize that aspect of our life very much until recently. So we just started choir practice this past week, a couple days ago. And we'll be joining that up again. So that's pretty cool, just on a personal note for us to be able to do that again. Music was a very big part of our lives for a number of years. And we've had to kind of put that on hold while we're doing the whole pen thing. So it's nice to get to kind of dabble in that a little bit. Our son started kindergarten last week, which is just kind of changed our whole routine a little bit. I've been biking a whole lot less because we have to get up earlier to get him ready, and then so now it's getting colder and it's completely dark outside the entire time, and I just haven't been able to do that very much. I've been working a lot, and so it's shifted our schedule around. Any of you who have had kids that started school kind of know what I'm talking about. It just kind of changes up the routine a little bit. So we're adjusting, but that's just something that's kind of been going on in our world. We've had so many product updates going on. So just this week we launched the Visconti Rembrandts as well as Visconti ink. For those of you that don't know, we are now officially authorized Visconti retailers, which is pretty exciting because we've been, kind of talking to them for the last several years. Well, I say talking at them really because we weren't really on their radar very much until recently. So we've wanted to be their retailers for probably the last 4 years, but it hasn't really happened until we recently made contact with them, had some really good conversations, found there's a good values alignment in a lot of ways. So that's worked out really well. So we'll have the Rembrandt, and then we'll have some other stuff that's going to be coming down the pike. Like we're going to have the Homo Sapiens that's going to be coming out in a couple of weeks. We're going to have the Van Gogh as well. It's going to follow that up. And then they have a new limited edition pen called the Millenium Arc, which we've already done a blog post on last week that you can go and check that out. That'll be coming a little bit later after that. And then there's another one called the Saturno, which literally just a couple of days ago they announced. It's another limited edition. So we were told by Visconti that they come out with a lot of pens and that they would keep us busy, and they have been doing that. So it's really exciting. We've gotten a lot of good buzz and a lot of good feedback from you all. So we're excited about that. We'll be putting a lot of good videos and a lot of good pictures, information there. Got a great team here that's working really hard. Even though we've had the pens for a couple of weeks already, we're staggering out the release of these things on our site because we need to learn these pens inside and out because you're asking us a lot of great questions about them, and we need to really, really know them. So that's kind of the way we do things around here. We don't just throw stuff up on our site and see if it sells, usually. But we like to really know our stuff inside and out. So it's taking a little bit of time, so thank you for being patient. If you are excited about getting any of these pens, also we're taking special orders because they have a lot of really expensive pens that we may not be stocking regularly for a while. But you can always email special orders at GouletPens.com if you're interested in the Opera Metal or the Divina or any of that other stuff. You can check that out, Let's see here. What else have we got? Lamy Vista and Safari gift sets. We thought those weren't coming until more like October, but they actually came a little bit early. So it's something that Lamy's doing for the holiday season. So basically they package up the pen and ink and you get a little bit of a discount. And it's a nice little presentation as well. So it's great as a starter set or as a gift set that's coming. I know the holidays are a little bit further away, but they came early, so what the heck, we're gonna go ahead and have them up on the site pretty soon. The Fall 2015 Edison Nouveau Premiere. We are, Rachel and I are actually going to be shooting the video on it right after I shoot this video so that we can have it ready for Wednesday next week. That's the intended launch date, September 23rd, so it should be pretty cool. I think you will like it. It's going to be a little bit different than some of the stuff we've done before. So that's all I'm going to say. And I think the name is pretty cool. We really have enjoyed putting this one together, so a little bit edgier. And then we've got the Jinhao 159 in the new colors. We actually literally just got them in like, well, I think we're getting them in today as I'm shooting this video, but we got to photograph them. It's going to take us a little time to get them online. So we got a lot of other irons in the fire, so we will have them very, very soon. The Jinhao 159 is that huge honkin' Jinhao pen, and it's 5 new colors. So they're up on the site. You can see pictures of them and everything, but they'll be coming soon. Let's see here, what else? The Omas Ogiva cocktail is going to be coming down the pike as well. It's about a month out, but it'll be coming. So that's pretty exciting. We have a video out on that you can go and check out. The Rhodia ColoR Premium pads. It's colored Rhodia Premium tablets, and you can check those out. We're going to have them on the website soon enough. You know, as you can tell, I'm listing all this stuff. There's a lot of new stuff, and it's a lot to photograph, color correct, edit, all that kind of stuff. So those are going to be pushed out another several weeks, but we will have them up on the site soon enough. And then we're going to have the Pilot Vanishing Point limited edition 2015 pen called Twilight. It's an ombre that goes from a purple to like a blue. Really cool looking. We're actually going to be getting a sample ahead of time so we can photograph it and all that kind of stuff. That's not coming for a little while, at least a month. But those I think are going to go fast when they go. I know they're all pre-committed, so we ordered a bunch. We asked for more and they were like, yeah, we don't really have them. They're all committed in the world. So I know as far as retailers go, what they get, what we get, what everybody else gets is all that's going to be gotten. So if you are interested in that one, you're going to want to save up and then move fast as soon as it comes out, because I think there's going to be more interest than there will be pens, because it's a pretty sweet color. So that'll be kind of cool. And then we'll have the little mini Iroshizuku bottle set that'll be coming out a little bit further down the road. We'll also have the new Pilot Metropolitan colors as well. So we're getting the little mini Iroshizuku set ahead of time as a sample so we can photograph it and stuff like that. So that'll be cool, but that's not going to be coming for a little while. So I'm kind of telling you everything that's going to happen over the next month or month and a half. So it's a lot. It's a lot of things, and that's just all that we know about so far. So we will be busy. And then eventually we're going to have the Visconti Traveling Inkwell. I know that's something you may be thinking about with Visconti. We were back ordered on them. We tried to order them. So those will be coming at some point, but not until they actually have them in stock. So, whew, that's a lot of stuff, man. Let me tell you. Oh yeah, and I got Emmett joining me today, little Emmett robot. My son loves this guy, but I have confiscated him. I actually bought this for myself, but my son's a huge fan of the Lego Movie, really big fan of Legos. I've been known to have a few as well on my bookshelf, you know, Emmett and Angry Unikitty are joining me today, and they got little robots that are hanging off here. So Emmett's gonna hang out, be my wingman for this broadcast. All right, as we get into some questions here, I got a lot of troubleshooting questions this week, so I'll tackle some of those. First, I'm going to kick it off with some pens and writing questions. And I got all my pens like laid out here, so I'm trying to like prep ahead of time a little bit better. I know that's one piece of feedback is like, why do you have to go searching for pens? It's so much time to prep Q&A, you guys don't even know. I've explained it before, like all that is to prepare it, but it's literally like 45 minutes for me to chase around and go get all the pens and parts and everything and think through everything before I shoot the video. I just have to like cut it off at some point and be like, all right, if I can't find this thing, whatever. And then sometimes as I'm talking, I think of other things that I'm like, oh, you know what, I should show this. That's why I have my pen cabinet over to the side that I can just randomly pull stuff from. So anyway, I'm doing the best I can, folks, come on. All right, let's kick it off. Kate D on Facebook asked, how does a Jinhao X450 compare to a Jinhao X750 in weight? I like the X750, but it's just too heavy for me. Also, are there any differences in standard international converters? The Jinhao one is flimsy, and I'd like to replace it with something more sturdy. Love the Q&A. Well, I'm glad you love it, Kate. All right, so X450, and I pulled some of the more obvious colors so you could really see the difference. X450 is this blue one here, X750 is the black one. This is the Shimmering Sands, or as it's affectionately known around the Goulet shop, the Sparkle Pen. So, very kind of similar design. They're not drastically different pens. The grip is a little bit different. The grip has a little bit of this triangular thing going on the 450. The 450 is a little harder to uncap. I find the cap to be a little stiffer, you know, it's got the trim is different color and stuff like that, so it's not drastically different. They both use number 6 nibs, you can swap those out. But you're asking about specifically about the weight. Well, there is literally no difference in weight between these pens. They are both, I looked it up, I think 42 grams. So if you're looking for a lighter pen, the X750 is not going to be it. And then the 159 is even heavier. So all the Jinhao pens that we have here are heavy. Now Jinhao makes other models of pens that are probably lighter, but as far as I know, and I have some samples of some other ones, but they're all kind of heavy. Now they do make some lighter ones that are made of plastic and things like that, like the 559. We get asked about that from time to time, but that will be, you know, something that's, you know, we don't have, because it's like a Lamy Safari knockoff basically. So we try to steer away from the pens that are knockoffs, except the 159 is kind of a Mont Blanc 149 knockoff, but it's really not the same thing. I mean, it's like a close to $1,000 pen versus a $12 pen. It's really not the same thing. So it just kind of looks similar to it, but yes, so they're all pretty heavy. There's some, well, that pretty much answers that first part of your question. So let me talk about the standard international converters now. So the Jinhaos come with a converter that is not the best. Okay, so like this is the one that's coming on the 450. It's all clear plastic. It's even like kind of bent a little bit. I mean, the honest truth is these pens are really inexpensive. It's $10 for the whole pen with the converter and everything. So that's cheaper than most replacement nibs from other companies, including Goulet nibs. So you kind of take what you can get. However, it will fit a normal standard international converter, which I have right over here. So a normal standard international converter is going to be a little bigger, a little higher ink capacity, better made. It's going to last longer. So one of these is $5. So yes, it's half the cost of the pen, but it will function very well. So usually what I recommend is get the Jinhao. If you know you're going to use it a lot, go ahead and get a standard international converter so that you can swap it out, because inevitably this thing is probably going to fail eventually. I mean, all converters eventually wear out, but these are flimsier, so they're going to, you know, not have the same life that these other ones would. So, you know, if you're not sure about the fountain pen thing, you're just getting it as a concept, you think you might use cartridges more, then don't bother for the converter upgrade right off the bat, but just have it in your brain area there. That it might be a good idea to kind of keep this in mind for the future. If not, you know, if you don't place orders with us regularly, probably just go ahead and throw it in. It's $5. It's not worth paying additional shipping just for that down the road, should you actually want it. So that's kind of where I stand with that. All right, next question. This is from @GlassGlue on Twitter. Can you recommend a good, inexpensive way to try out an ultra extra fine or needlepoint nib? Okay, I've got some. There really is no affordable ultra extra fine that I'm aware of. Now I have some extra fines that are very, very fine that I think would be good alternatives for you, but nothing that's actually classified as ultra extra fine or needlepoint. And a lot of the reason for that is that you cannot like machine grind a needlepoint nib. It requires a lot of handwork. I feel like I'm gonna sneeze, just giving you a heads up. It requires a lot of handwork, see, because I said that, it's going away. It requires a lot of handwork, which requires people, which requires time, which requires money. Okay, so basically you're not going to be able to just stamp out a $10 super needlepoint nib. It's just not going to happen. So I have some pens here that I think are pretty darn good for the money. The first one is the Platinum Preppy Extra Fine. Now it's a Japanese company that makes this Platinum, and their extra fine nib is finer than extra fine nibs, say from, you know, other like Lamy, TWSBI, and other companies that use European nibs. But this nib is ground pretty darn fine. It's $5. You're not going to do much better than this for $5. Okay, so this one, wholeheartedly recommend it. Another one that's pretty darn good as well is another one from Platinum. This is called the Carbon Desk Pen. It's, you know, around $12 or somewhere thereabouts. Also very fine point. Now the pen itself is a little weird to like if you're trying to carry it around or something. It's really meant as a desk pen, hence the name. It looks like a pen like you'd have at the bank, you know what I mean? Back when you used to like actually sign things at the bank. I can't remember the last time I've signed something at the bank, everything's electronic or whatever. But anyway, so this nib is pretty gosh darn fine as well, and also what I would consider to be very affordable. Those are the two that I actually have at gouletpens.com. Now, another one that I have used that also is pretty good is a Platinum, no, said that wrong, Pilot penmanship. And I'm asking them, begging, pleading them to get this pen into the US. Currently, it is not stocked in the US. So you can still get them, but it's a little harder. I don't have them, but I do have this one in my personal collection. So it uses a similar nib as what you would find in the Pilot Metropolitan or the Pilot Prera, Pilot Plumix. So it's very similar in design there, but it's an extra fine nib. It's not smooth, but it's an extra fine nib. So this is also pretty darn good. And I think this thing usually is around $10-ish. So it's also pretty affordable. A little harder to find, but you can find them out there on the internets. And I'm okay sharing that with you, even though it's something I don't have because I can't get it. So we'll see. Maybe one day. Maybe one day. But that I think pretty much covers all of my options. Now, if you want a true ultra extra fine, the only one that I know that you can really get is the Platinum 3776. It's going to be $176, so it's not what I think most people would consider to be affordable, but the nib is pretty sweet, and it's going to be very, very fine. So that's about as needlepoint as I can think without going for a custom grind from a nib person. And most of the nib shows and stuff I've gone to, you're going to pay probably around $50 or more, plus shipping possibly if you're not actually at a show or something, to get a needlepoint nib ground. That's in addition to the cost of the pen. So these options that I just mentioned here are pretty much the best I can think of. If you have any other recommendations, just let me know in the comments. Next question. JCS on Facebook asked, I like to drive to the mountains once a week for my music and like to take some pens for sketching. Once one leaks, will it always leak or is it a hit and miss thing? Okay, so I got to read into your question here a little bit. You mentioned the mountains, so I'm guessing you have some elevation change going on. This is going to be a similar effect to if you're flying. Now I have a video on flying. It's called Fountain Pen 101, Flying with Fountain Pens or something like that. I should have looked up the name ahead of time, but look up Fountain Pen 101 Flying and you'll find it. The principle behind that is if you have a pen and you are changing elevation, specifically going from a lower elevation to a higher elevation, okay, you're decreasing in pressure, in atmospheric pressure as you go higher. And what happens there is the air that is inside your pen is staying at a higher pressure. The atmospheric pressure is dropping. So when you have higher pressure in your pen, lower atmospheric pressure, it's going to want to equalize. So if you have your nib pointed up, you're going to be pretty much okay no matter what your scenario, because your ink is going to be hanging down at the bottom. You're going to have air up here by your nib. The only place for air to go is out the nib when there's a higher pressure inside the pen and a lower atmospheric pressure. So it's going to go up, and you might get a little spatter here and there if your nib was really saturated before you started traveling, but you're not going to get a big leak. If you have your pen on the side or nib pointed down and you have like your ink level's a little lower and you have a decent air pocket in here, that's where you can start to see some leaking, burping, whatever you want to call it. And the bigger the pen you have, the bigger the ink capacity of the pen and the more air that is in there, the bigger the leak, your potential for your leak could be, specifically for changing elevations like this. Now, it's not as big a deal coming from the mountains going back down to wherever you are, because you're increasing in pressure, and as the atmospheric pressure increases, it's wanting to push pressure into the pen, so it's not going to cause leaking quite as much. So not really an issue there. It's more when you're going from a lower to a higher elevation. So pretty much your solution is keep your nib pointed up if you can. You know, if you have it in like a laptop bag or a backpack or something like that, just make sure you keep all your pens with the nibs up and keep your backpack kind of standing up, and you really won't have a problem. I actually hear about leaking way less than you would probably expect in this kind of situation. Another thing you can do to help is either keep the pen completely full of ink or completely empty. Now I'm guessing for you, it'd probably be better to keep it completely full, because if you're going to the mountains, you're not gonna wanna like bring your bottle of ink and then, you know, go on your hike or whatever it is that you're doing and like filling your pen as you go. You're probably gonna wanna fill your pens before you go, but think about it, if you have it full of ink, you might be like, oh my gosh, all the ink is gonna leak out. Oh my gosh, it's gonna be terrible. Not necessarily, okay? So if you have a lot of ink in the pen and no air, then it doesn't really matter if the pressure changes, because ink is mostly water. Water cannot increase or decrease in volume or pressure on its own. So you can try to increase it, but there's a word for it. I don't know, science, but you can't like pressurize water. So it's only gonna change in pressure as much air as you have in there. So if you keep it filled up with ink, you're gonna be actually in better shape than you would if it was half full, if that makes sense to you. So that I think is gonna be your ticket. But specifically kind of to answer your follow-up question there, like once it leaks, is it always gonna leak or anything? I think yours is a situational thing. Certainly some pens have more of a potential for leaking, so if it's the first time it's leaked, if you emulate the exact circumstances again, surely it could leak again. But it's not like the pen has like been broken or something and it never leaked and now it's broken so it's always gonna leak. No, it's more about the conditions that the pen are in than it is about like something has changed within the pen. Does that make sense? So no, the fact that your pen has leaked once doesn't mean it's going to leak in more situations. It just means that in that specific scenario, it could leak again. So you just want to do some preventative things like I mentioned to keep it from happening again. Sweet. All right, that's a good segue into some ink questions here, or ink question, I should say. I only got one this week. This is from Michael T on Facebook. I'm about to have a Visconti Van Gogh Starry Night. I don't know why I said that with an accent, but I felt I needed to. And I want an equally stellar dark blue ink that isn't pigmented based or has any particulate in it. I want the ink I put in this pen to amaze me as much as the pen will. Any suggestions? I know your list of favorite blue inks is endless. True. Well, I mean, it does end. There's only so many blue inks. But if you could limit it to the darkest blues without going to black, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, so I definitely chose some. Went to the handy dandy swab shop on gouletpens.com, which honestly, I love having that tool for you guys, but I like having it for myself. Honestly, I reference the thing practically every day. So I picked out some of my favorite blues, the ones that don't have like glittery stuff in or pigment or anything like that. So I ruled out Platinum Pigment Blue. I ruled out Jeroboam 1670 Blue Ocean because it's got like gold shimmer to it. Now, you asked me to find inks that will amaze you. I don't know what amazes you, so I'm going to just tell you some that amaze me, and maybe they will also amaze you. They're just kind of some of the, what I think are the nicer, richer, kind of more saturated dark blue inks, and you'll just have to kind of determine whether they're amazing to you or not. But I'll give you some options. First one, this is definitely one of the ones on my favorite list, Diamine Majestic Blue. Love it. It's a dark blue. It's got a nice red sheen to it. Doesn't have like particulate or anything, just something about the dye brings out a nice red sheen sometimes, especially in certain lights, like when you put it in kind of hold it up and whew, light hits it and it's a nice red sheen. Very cool. Does not dry quickly, I'll tell you that right now, but it's awesome. It's in my top 10 sheening inks video that we just put out last week, which is pretty cool. Other options, Diamine 1864 Blue Black. Just check that one out. It's pretty cool. Very dark, very saturated blue black. Diamine Regency Blue, also very dark, saturated. It's not, these aren't like really gray or really like black, blue blacks. These are like really deep, rich, like navy blues, I think. So I think you might like these. Those are kind of some of the most wowing dark blue inks that I can think of. I got some others that are maybe slightly less wow, but maybe you'll find them interesting as an option. Rohrer and Klingner Verdigris is kind of nice. Also, Rohrer & Cleaner Leipziger Schwarz. Those are very dark, especially the Leipziger Schwarz. Very, very, very dark. Almost kind of black, maybe too black for you based on your kind of recommendation there, but you can check it out. Private Reserve Ebony Blue. That one's got a little bit of a green to it almost, but kind of an interesting. Maybe that will be kind of a new element you haven't considered before. And then the Diatramentis Black Edition Black Blue. Also kind of cool. Very, very dark as well. So those are some options for you. If anybody else has recommendations, hit up the comments. All right, got a couple of personal questions this week. This one is from Mike F. He shot us an email and said, you keep mentioning that in the beginning you were a starving student making pens. How do you make a pen? I'm not going to do it, but I am interested in that as your background. Okay, little fact checking here real quick. I wasn't actually a starving student making pens. I technically was never starving. Look at me, like I'm not starving. Okay, never was. Especially if you watch my earlier videos, you know I was not starving. I used to be a lot heavier. That's what I'm getting at. So no, I was never really starving. I was pretty broke though, but I think that's what you're actually getting at. So anyway, making pens, that's really what matters. I didn't actually start making pens until I had graduated from school already. I graduated Virginia Tech in 2006. I started making pens in 2007. So it was about a year after I graduated before I did it. So it was post-graduation. Thankfully, graduated college with no debt. That was awesome. Best advice my parents ever gave me. Something I worked hard basically my whole life to be able to do. Pretty sweet. Proud to say that. That said, I also graduated with no like actual money. So Rachel and I got married right out of school. We were doing the just married starting off kind of thing. And I was starting a business with my dad at the time that hadn't really taken off yet. So wasn't flush with cash. But I wanted to get into pen making as a hobby because I needed to make things. I was just very hands-on and it needed to happen. So basically what the process is, I have a genuine Goulet pen right here, and I'll zoom in a little bit so that I can kind of show this to you. I really liked making pens out of wood. You can make them out of acrylic and all kinds of other materials, you know, buffalo horn and deer antler and all kinds of other stuff. This particular one is made of some kind of burl wood, and I'm almost failing to remember exactly what the wood is right now. My goodness. Red mallee burl. That's what this is. Very cool. So this is actual wood, and basically what a burl is when a trunk of a tree like starts to grow a branch or something, and it's kind of like a genetic disorder or something like that within the tree. Basically, it's kind of like the branch grows out, but it kind of just grows and knots up into like this tumor that kind of grows on the tree. So instead of this nice like straight branch that grows out, you end up with this like curled up knotted hunk of wood that's just hanging on the side of the tree, which looks pretty ugly from the outside. But you cut that thing off and you turn it into some kind of wood device like this, and you put a nice finish on it, and it ends up with this amazing kind of swirl pattern. This is natural wood right here with a very glossy finish, as you can see. So the process for actually making one of these pens is relatively simple in concept. It takes a lot of practice though. So basically, you look at the components of the pen. There's metal components and there's wood components. And what you do is you have these brass tubes, which I don't think you can really see in there, but there's a brass tube inside of there. And I've got a monitor over here I'm looking at to make sure it's in focus and whatnot. But there's a brass tube, and you drill a hole through the wood. You glue your brass tube in there. You kind of cut the ends. And then you have a small lathe, and you have these things called bushings that you know, show you basically the size that you're trying to drill it down to, so that you can have it fit to the edges of the metal, the kit of the pen, if you will. So you're buying this metal kit, you buy bushings that match said kit, and then you turn it down to that exact diameter. You sand it, polish it up, take it off the lathe, you press it together, and voila, you have a pen. So that's the concept. It's way easier to do in principle than it is to actually do in person. This particular pen I made towards the end of my pen making career. It's one of the few like half decent pens that I have left, mainly because at the time I was pretty broke, and so when we started up this company in its current form, I had to sell any pen that anyone would buy so that we could buy like an extra 5 pads of paper so that we could sell them on gouletpens.com back when nobody knew about us or cared who we were. So things have changed a little bit since then, but that was a good while ago now. It was, over 8 years ago I started making those pens, and it's now been 5.5 years since I've made a pen. So I don't even have a workshop anymore. You know, I'm just your typical guy with 2 kids and a wife and a house with a garage that we park a car in, and I've got, you know, kids' bikes and, you know, all kinds of random recyclables and all that kind of stuff in my garage now. So I don't have like an actual wood shop. I have a shed that I have some of my pen making tools. I sold off a lot of my tools and materials because we needed to fund the Goulet Pen Company in its current form. So I sold off all that stuff. You know, you won't get a Goulet pen like this probably ever again. But you know, I still have the skills. It's just been longer now since I've done it than it was for the duration that I actually did it. So I don't know how sharp those skills would be anymore, but that's basically the story of how it was done. One thing I will tell you is if you are interested in this at all, it's very accessible. It's something that you can do yourself. It's a fun hobby. It's definitely a rabbit hole. I sold my pens so that I could help fund the hobby. I thought I would turn it into a business. Obviously, eventually I kind of did, but as a pen making venture, I never made any money at it. In fact, kind of lost a bunch. But that's welcome to starting a business 101. You work for 3 years, don't get paid anything, and end up losing money in the end. That can happen. Hey, it's a lesson. It happens. Can't be afraid to do that when you get into it. That said, if you want to do it as a hobby, it can be a lot of fun. Just kind of view it as a hobby would be my recommendation. Because I knew a lot of people that did pen making, a lot of retirees and guys that love woodworking, and now they, you know, kind of semi-retire and they get into it to have something to do, and they end up going to craft shows and selling them, just kind of self-fund the hobby. Lots of people doing that. So that said, go check out, there's a forum that I found very helpful when learning how to do fountain pens. If you are familiar with fountain pens and the Fountain Pen Network as a forum, there is a forum that is equivalent in its importance in the pen turning world. There actually is a little pen turning section on the Fountain Pen Network. You can check that out. But if you go over to the International Association of Pen Turners, which is penturners.org, you can check out all kinds of crazy stuff that people are doing. And if you're interested, there's lots of people like me, but in the pen turning world, that put out good blog posts and information and stuff like that. It's not quite as robust as the fountain pen community, but lots of folks on there making pens that are talking about how they do it and different techniques and stuff like that. It's pretty interesting if you're into that kind of thing. So I would go check that out. I used to be super active on there before I got into fountain pens. I think I did something like, I don't know, 13, 14, 1,500 posts, something like that. I don't know. But I was pretty active. Next question, Alex W on Facebook. If I see someone using a fountain pen, what are some questions that make for good conversation starters with that person? I live in a friendly part of the country, so casual conversations with strangers is not considered rude. That's funny. Like, is it considered rude? I guess kind of, like if somebody just comes up to you and, I don't know, you play it by ear, but you say you're in a friendly part of the country, but my feeling about it, sorry, Emmett. My feeling about it is that most people that are into fountain pens are into them, and usually they're kind of like in their own little cocoon, right? Like, so I'm an anomaly because I am surrounded by people that actually know what I'm talking about most of the time. But as soon as I step outside of this building, when I whip out a fountain pen, people are like, what is that? Or they might be like, oh my gosh, a fountain pen. I've seen that in a movie, but I've never used it, or something like that. But it's still pretty like weird to use one, and it's almost like a secret society or something of people who know about fountain pens. Like if you see somebody around with a fountain pen, you're like, oh my gosh, I could use certain words and they would know what I'm talking about, you know? So me personally, if I was using a pen in public and someone came up to me and was like, oh my gosh, you have a fountain pen, that's so cool, where'd you get it, what kind is it, what ink do you have, da 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 da, I would be super interested to talk to them, just because I get to talk to people about pens all the time, so it's probably a little less so for me than maybe for some of you who don't, you're like the weird one at your office who's like cleaning your pens in your lunch break, and everybody's like, what weirdo, like you got your ink stained hands when you go to shake people, and they're like, what's wrong with you? That's what most people are dealing with, at least in the US, where it's like not as strong a fountain pen culture maybe as in Europe or Japan. But around here, it's like usually most people are like the one at work who is using your pens, and most people don't know what you're talking about. So they're like, don't ask him about pens because he'll go off and be all saying a bunch of words that you don't know. That's not the case. It's a weirdness that I like to embrace. But anyway, so that said, kind of the caveat, like, hey, you probably, I would like to assume that if you talk to somebody who's using a fountain pen, they probably know something about fountain pens, and you could jump into some lingo and stuff pretty quickly and have like a kind of a common bond interest there with that person. So just a couple of questions, like a little bit off the top of my head, I wrote them down, but they were kind of just top of mind. Just start off and be like, hey, I see you got a fountain pen there. Like, what brand is it? What nib size is it? What ink do you have in there? Maybe asking them like where they got it or how they got into fountain pens, because it's not a normal thing necessarily. Like if someone is more experienced in life, I'll say, there's a chance they might have used them in school, and it's not super common for someone to have used them in school 30, 40 years ago and still be using them today. I would not say that that's probably the norm, so there's probably still an interesting story. And be like, oh my gosh, I see you're using a fountain pen, that's so cool, me too. If you have a pen on you, boom, bust it out and be like, oh, this is my blah, 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 blah. And they're probably not going to be like, ooh, weirdo, probably they're going to be like, oh, really? That's cool. And talking about like where you get your stuff would be cool, how, the background and all that. Obviously you could always like throw out the Goulet name and see if they know what's up, if they happen to know me. That sounds really narcissistic, and I'm sorry for that. But I honest to goodness, I have had way more than a few people say, oh my gosh, I met somebody with a Twisby or met somebody with a Metropolitan, and I immediately started talking to them, and we both shop at Goulet, and we watch your videos, and we love it, blah, 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 and so on. So that's kind of cool. If there is a way that you can like have a common bond of like, if somebody like watches these videos or something like that, that would be even cooler. So definitely shouldn't like lead off with that, but it's, a point in conversation that would be kind of cool. So yeah. I'm looking down all my pens here. That's why I keep glancing down. But so yeah, that's kind of just some talking points maybe you could start off with. But all right, now we get into the troubleshooting questions. I got 5 of them, so let's do it. Neville S on YouTube says 2 pilot-related questions. Okay, so it's technically 6 questions. Number 1, what's the best way to clean out a custom 823? Number 2, how can I get ink out of my custom 74 cap insert? Both good questions. I have both great answers. Okay, custom 823, for those of you who are not familiar, it's this beautiful amber pen with gold trim and is this a 14 karat nib? Yes, 14 karat nib. It's an awesome pen. I love it a lot. I'm a big fan of the Custom 74, which we'll get to in a second. The Custom 823 is also fantastic. It's a little more expensive, so it's not necessarily like my go-to recommendation. However, if you like pilot nibs and you want a larger pen, slightly heavier, and you think the vacuum filling is cool, and you got the funds, I highly recommend the Custom 823. It's $288. That's why it's not just super cheap. So it's a vacuum filling pen, which means that it is not like other fountain pens. So the way that a vacuum filling pen works, that those of you who are not familiar, you pull up the rod and it has this seal right here. And the seal hugs against the walls of the pen until it gets to right about this point where it flares out. And what happens is it's building pressure. Well, I guess technically it's not building pressure. It's creating a negative pressure behind the seal, okay, as you're pushing it down. And then as soon as it drops off, it does that. It makes this kind of clicking noise. As soon as it drops off here, the negative pressure up here Well, basically in nature, when you have a vacuum, it always wants to be filled, right? So it's creating a vacuum, and when you put this in your ink, as soon as you push it down here, the ink will just whoosh, rush up into the grip, to the body of the pen. And, well, gosh, I wonder if I could actually show it. Yeah, I could show it. Well, if I show it, then, darn it. If I show you how it works, then I won't be able to do it. Now, you know what? Okay, so this is one of those audibles that I'm kind of calling right here. Oh, I don't have a clear cup. Blah! You know, I thought it would be kind of cool to show it. Let me see if I can find an ink vial. There you go. Okay, I'm going to try this. Did not plan this ahead of time. I'm just going to use water, so hopefully it'll be a good demonstration. Okay, this may be a disaster, but we will try it because I have to hold it up. Let's zoom in, shall we? This will be a bit of an experiment. Okay, so I'm going to try to show you what's going on. So I have an ink sample that's filled with water. It's maybe a little too much water, but we will see. I don't know if I have enough to actually displace my nib. Oh boy, let's see here. Okay, this is going to be a little bit of a disaster. Let me just drop out a little bit. Put that in my trash can, not on the floor, by the way. Okay, so we're going to see the concept, but anyway, so I'm going to push it down. So it's kind of pushing some air out of the pen. And you'll see as soon as it drops off, which it's going to do right now, boom! Look at how much that filled up. See that? And you do it a couple more times, and it works out better when it's not in a sample vial, but that's the concept. So it just shoots in, fills up like that. So anyway, you're asking how to clean it. I'm going to actually just push this back in here. I cleaned the pen, but it looks like I didn't clean it super great because it's a little murky in there. There we go. Okay. So the way to clean it is to basically do what I just did over and over and over again with clean water. I usually do it a few times with water, just kind of recycling it. And I like to clean, when I clean my pens, I like to use like a small Dixie cup like this. It's blue, I know. I like to use a small Dixie cup, and the way that I do it is I just, you know, flush and flush and flush and flush and flush. Dump the water, get clean water, flush and flush and flush and flush and flush. If it looks discolored still, dump the water. And I do that like maybe 2 or 3 times. And then by that time, when you're flushing it, it's basically clear. And then the way to tell like really how clean it is you get a paper towel or a terry cloth towel or something like that, and you touch the nib to the towel like so, and it will draw water out of the feed. And you can see there, I've got a little bit of color in there still. So I need to clean it more, clearly. I had Von Stormy Gray in here for a while, and I need to clean it out a little more thoroughly, but that's the concept. So you just keep on doing that, and that will clean it out. Now, I will give you another option. If you really want to clean it out thoroughly, you can actually remove the vacuum piston out of the pen, and it just so happens if you have a TWSBI pen, the TWSBI wrench fits on this pen precisely. If you don't have a TWSBI wrench, you can use a small, whatever, wrench. And actually, what size wrench is this? I want to say 8mm. I can't quite remember. Let me measure it real quick, like 8mm. Yeah. So if you have an 8mm small, like actual wrench, it'll fit on this pen. It's not like the TWSBI where it's got to fit in this really tight, narrow space. The TWSBI VAC 700 is what I'm talking about. It will fit because you can pull this piston all the way up, and you have plenty of room here. So any 8mm wrench should do it. So you put that thing on there, you twist it counterclockwise, and now just twist the pen. And then you can remove said mechanism out of the pen. It does have this little gold ring that will kind of want to fall off, so you got to watch out for that. And it has the gold ring has to be put back on in a specific way. But then when you want to actually flush out the pen, there's 2 great tools that you want to have. One is a bulb syringe, so you can just fill this thing up with water, stick it in here, and you just flush it out. Works really well. And then what you can do is you can just kind of take this part and just use a Q-tip or just swirl it around in your little Dixie cup of water, and that'll take care of that. And then what I like to do is I keep some Q-tips handy. I kind of Q-tip around here. I'll Q-tip maybe inside the body and whatnot, get the threads back here, and that'll get it really, really thoroughly cleaned. Cool? Okay, then when you're putting it back together, you have this gold ring. It's got to be put on a specific way. So it's got like an inset on one side of it. The inset part has to fit onto the mechanism like so. So you just kind of fit it on there like that, and then you really can just hand tighten it back in here, like so. And then maybe just use the wrench to like give it a little bit of a final thing. And then voila, you're good to go again. So that's a cool little trick. So that answers part 1 of your question. Part 2 of your question, you're talking about the Custom 74. I'll stay zoomed in here. Custom 74 and actually Custom 823 and several other pens as well have an insert that is in the cap of the pen. The point of this insert is to keep the nib from drying out as quickly. So the easiest way to get that taken care of is to use these very advanced, highly specialized tools. A number 2 pencil and a rubber band. So the way to do this is you take the rubber band like so and you balance it delicately on the end of the pencil and then you pull it down like so, okay? Just so that it's kind of tightening up over the end. And then you take the pencil, you jam it in here, and then I like to give it a little bit of a twist just to kind of free things up, and then voila, there's your insert. On the Pilot pens here, at least the Custom 74 and the 823, it's not like screwed into the cap or anything. Some pens, the insert is actually screwed into the cap. Then you'll need a screwdriver to unscrew it, and you may or may not be able to use this rubber band trick to get it out. But for this particular pen, which is what you asked me about, it works phenomenally. And then you can get behind there, you can clean it all out and everything, which I might need to do a little bit. But and then when you need to put it back, it's very easier. Just pressure fit, so you can pretty much just like bloop, drop it in there, take your pencil, kind of like tap it in, and you're good to go. Voila. And you can do the same thing on the Custom 823 too, which I'll do just because I already have it so handy. Now this one, the insert's actually like a dark black color. And it's a little bit bigger, so you might have to like double up the rubber band or kind of twist it around a bit to kind of fill some of that space, but it'll still come out. It's the same concept. Yeah, this one, see, this one's opaque. That's kind of cool. And actually you could even use it without that insert, and then you could like see your beautiful nib. But it's not gonna keep it dry, keep it wet as easily. So you see here, this is how it mates up. So the nib just kind of goes on here. It kind of fits right onto the grip of the pen, so it just kind of helps to keep it wetter. And it actually does a really good job, especially for what a simple device that it is, and then you can just screw it back in and it'll just put it right back in place. Voila! That is the magical process. And I like to use those tools because they're very handy. It doesn't require anything specialized. If you were like doing that all day long, you may want a more advanced tool, but for typical fumbling around, cleaning it once every couple of months or whatever, these tools will work just fine. All right, William S. on Facebook says, we all talk about cleaning the insides of our pens, but what should a person use to clean the exterior parts of a pen? Yes, very simple, and I'm now realizing I forgot to grab one of the things that I was going to grab, but I'll just tell you about it anyway. So one of the things that I use on a pretty regular basis is this beautiful, loud microfiber cloth. You can get these all over the place. A lot of auto stores will have them, or like you look at the automotive department of Target or Walmart or whatever, you can find microfiber cloths. And this is really good just for wiping off fingerprints, for getting, just light dust and dirt and stuff off of there. If you have a plastic pen and you want it to, we end up like photographing a lot of pens here, as you can imagine. That's almost kind of a dumb statement, but we do that, and we wipe it with a cloth. Sometimes if you're trying to do like macro photography or something, like I can see there's like a little dust here. Like when you're wiping it with a cloth like this, it can actually kind of static charge the pen a little bit, which like makes dust want to grab onto it. So it's maybe not like the best dust tool or whatever, but it does do a really good job of getting fingerprints and hand oils and stuff like that off of there. Of course, as soon as you touch the pen again, it's going to do it again, but whatever. For some light cleaning, and you can use it, you could use it wet, you could use a wet paper towel and kind of wipe it down. The softer the thing, the better. For cleaning the exterior of most pens, honestly, the most you would want to use is like water with a little dish soap in it. Dish soap is pretty harmless for pens. So that in general is gonna get pretty much anything you need to off of it. Maybe you'll need a pen flush if you've got some ink that like somehow made it on the outside of the pen and it's being really stubborn and needs to be cleaned off. But in general, just even like the water with the dish soap should be able to clean the exterior of the pen with a decent cloth like this. Now, if you have a pen that you need that has some light scratches and you want to actually kind of restore it a little bit, that's when the other cloth that I don't have handy comes in handy. It's called a jeweler's cloth, and you can find it at most department stores or probably most jewelry stores. It's a cloth that's usually like white and purple, and it's impregnated with some polishing compound. So it's safe for jewelry and whatnot. So it'll be safe for the trim of your pen and all that kind of stuff. Actually, it works really well for polishing the trim of your pen. Also works well on plastics too. So if you just got like some light surface scratches, and I'm just noticing like this pen actually looks pretty good. This is the Custom 74 I've had for years, and I really haven't polished it. I don't know if I've ever polished it with a jeweler's cloth, but it's still holding up. Just love this pen. Anyway, so a light, treatment with a jeweler's cloth will get out the fine scratches you get just from kind of handling it. If you're dropping it on concrete and you get a big gash on it, it's not going to polish that out, but just the light handling and kind of tossing around and sliding in and out of your backpack or your pocket or whatever, you're going to get some little things over time, but that will polish right out with the jeweler's cloth for the most part. There's other things you could get into, like you can get into micro mesh, or you could get into like an actual acrylic like polishing compound. That is really more like restoration work. That's not cleaning, so that could be like an even deeper subject I could get into, and I'll kind of refrain from that. I think I may have already said too much. But as far as cleaning goes, the jeweler's cloth is kind of the most I would consider. And that's kind of what you're going to get to when you get into like any sterling silver pens. Because those can tarnish a little bit over time, and a jeweler's cloth polishes that right up. So it's still really kind of cleaning, borderline restoring. But those two things, the microfiber cloth and then the jeweler's cloth, are pretty much my standard for what I use to clean my pens. Marina M on Facebook asks, is it possible to completely disassemble a Lamy Z24 converter? Looking for a lazy person's shortcut when cleaning my Safari and Vista converters. Well, I don't know if it's a lazy thing because it's a bit of work to do it. I'm going to move Emmett to the side a little bit here. And this actually is really cool because I've never done a video on disassembling the Lamy Z24 converter until now, and I shove it into like minute 52 of a Q&A. But Jenny will probably be able to slice it up and we'll make it its own video anyway. But here we go, Lamy Z24 converter. I'm going to zoom in a bit so you can see what is going on. You're very familiar with this. This is actually the #1 selling product at gouletpens.com. The Z24 converter. So I have a couple of tools that I'm going to use. Basically, the structure of this converter is it's a twist piston that moves up and down, and everything is held together right here. Okay, so the magic is this doesn't unscrew this black metal shroud. You gotta yank it off. And you can do it with, this is a Goulet grip that's been pretty well used. So you can just take it's a strip of rubber. You can use a bicycle tire, maybe a rubber band. Rubber bands tend to be a little soft. This is harder than a rubber band, but something to that effect. You can just grip the converter here and you just kind of pull. That metal shroud comes right off, okay? But your work is not done yet. Okay, because this part of the mechanism is still in place. It's like snapped in place here. And I need a little extra juice when I'm pulling this off because it's actually harder to get this out of there than it is to get the shroud off. So what you want to do, you don't want to pull just by the red thing. You want to try and grip it by the black part here. So I'm going to put it right there and I'm going to grab the other end, and I got to like position myself to I'll try and hold it up high. There we go. And I just yanked it right out of there. You got to put a good amount of force on there. So if you don't get it the first time, don't be disheartened. But that's it. It pulls right out of there. So you can disassemble it even more if you want to, which basically you just pull this little piston out. But the rest of it I wouldn't pull it apart any more than this. So you could wash all these parts out, and then you can, you know, flush out your converter. If you have a Q-tip, like I have here, then you can use a Q-tip and kind of Q-tip this part out, which comes in handy. You're still going to get ink that's going to get behind here. Yes, technically you can push this part out, which, let me see if I can just do it with a Q-tip. Oh, the Q-tip's going to like fall apart. Oh, there we go. Look at that. Just pulled that out with the Q-tip. So you can pull that part out, and you can kind of Q-tip out around there, so you don't have to worry about the ink that's going to get caught behind this black part. So we're really like getting nitty gritty with this thing, and this part's just going to snap back into place. Voila. You do want to make sure you assemble it back on the correct end. And then when you go to put the piston back together, this is a good opportunity if you have any silicone grease or anything like that. It's a good opportunity to go ahead and just apply a little bit of that to your converter just to keep it working really smooth. So since you've already got it apart, just a little dab of silicone grease on the thumb or maybe on the end of the Q-tip or a toothpick or something. You put a little bit on the threads here of the piston, and that's going to work well, and then a little bit around the edge of the piston seal, and that's going to keep it moving super smooth inside your pen or inside the converter body. So you just kind of move it up and down a little bit. That feels good. And then to reassemble it, you just take it, push it in here, and it's going to snap in place just like so. And then your shroud, and of course you want to make sure your silicone grease is off your fingers, and then you use your shroud and just put your shroud back on. I'm trying to see if it's going to matter which direction. I don't think it really does matter. You just take your shroud and you can just push it back on. You don't even need the rubber grip for that, and it just pushes right on. And now I have a perfectly clean, even though I already had a perfectly clean, but if it was inky, it would now be perfectly clean. Perfectly clean converter that is now super greased up and working fine. I didn't mean to throw it down on the table like that, but there you go. That right there is how you clean a Lamy Z24. Let me zoom back out. I don't know why I waited so long to do anything on the Z24. I've been asked this for years. Anyway, maybe I'll like make it its own video, but this slice will work pretty well. All right, number 10, GimmeeCookiee on our blog asked, I recently got a Lamy 2000, and after cleaning it out for the first time, there are dark stain lines on the body, as seen in the attached photo. And the photo was on the blog. So you can check out the photo if you want on Goulet Q&A episode number 94. Go to the blog, you can see the picture. I've tried cleaning it with soap and water, but it does not make any difference. Any suggestions? Okay. Well, Tom on the blog was actually able to answer the question before I even got to it, but his answer was spot on. Basically, I looked at your pictures, and what it looked like to me was not actually a stain, but it was actually like a mark that was made in the material. So I'm going to try to zoom in and show you, see if I can hit the light right, but show you a little bit of the brushed finish of the pen. So these pens are made of macrolon, which is a kind of a unique material. It's a blend of fiberglass and resin. And it's like focusing on my face. It's gonna be hard, but you can see, especially on the stainless steel part, you can see that it's got a brushed finish. Okay, so you can see it's got these kind of brush marks that go in this direction. And even though it's kind of hard to see on the black from this far away, it's the same situation on the body of the pen. Oh, see, it wants to. If I hide, maybe it'll focus on the pen. There you go. So I'm trying to catch it in the light just right, and it's not really working that great. But anyway, so what happens over time as you use your pen a lot, and this is actually a pen I haven't used that much. I have another Lamy 2000 I've used a lot more that has more marring on it, if you will. But basically, as your hand kind of rubs it, it can shine it up a little bit. As you like carry it around, it could get nicked, it could get scraped. It can kind of rub away the finish. That brushed finish on it. However, you can restore it pretty easily. And Lamy actually recommends using a Scotch-Brite pad. It's just a gentle Scotch-Brite pad, and you go in the direction of the pen like this. Don't go around the pen because that will not be in the same direction it was originally polished. But you just go in the direction, and that Scotch-Brite pad will kind of re-scuff the pen in the correct direction and will fix exactly what you have in your picture. Kind of creepy with me this in on the camera, isn't it? Pretty sweet lens on this camera though. All right, let's see here. Last question of the day today. This is from Kuklan on Twitter. Forgive me if I completely said that wrong. My Jinhao pens have trouble starting and are rough, scratchy writers. How do I improve them at home? Okay, so Jinhao pens are relatively inexpensive pens. They're very sturdy. They're very, well, we get them direct out of China, which is not necessarily known for like top super quality control all the time, but it's an affordable pen, so you kind of have a little give and take. I will say though, for the price of the pens, I'm actually very pleasantly surprised with the quality of them, particularly with how well most of the nibs write. I do hear about some bum ones every now and then, but often the situation that happens with these nibs is it's a tine misalignment, which causes it to feel scratchy, but it's a relatively simple fix. I have a couple of videos already on how to kind of do some of these adjustments. If you check out the Goulet loop tutorial, I show how to use a loop like I have right here. And you basically just kind of look straight at the nib like this. Oh yeah, this one's a little bit misaligned, just a little bit. You look at it and you're gonna look straight at the nib, and you can tell, like as you're looking at the tip of that nib, if it's misaligned, that means like one of the tines is dropped down a little bit. And it's a very easy fix. All you gotta do is take your fingernail and you push up on that tine that's a little bit low. And I'm literally gonna fix this nib as we're talking here. I look at it again, and that's spot on. That's it. Now I'm swirling it on the paper. It feels fantastic. So I didn't swirl around beforehand, but there you go. I just fixed this nib. That's literally how long it takes. So if you look right at the nib, you can tell that the tine is misaligned if it's dropped down like that. Now, if the tines are perfectly aligned and it's still writing scratchy, then you might need to go to something like micro mesh. And I have some micro mesh right here. This is what I've well used. We sell this at gouletpens.com. We also sell the loop too, if you want to get into any kind of restoration stuff. Now, it doesn't make sense to buy a loop and a micro mesh just for this one pen. You know, if you get it and it's just not working, honestly, sometimes with a tine misalignment, you can just look at it with your naked eye or use a magnifying glass or some kind of magnification device. You don't necessarily need a loop to do this one time. So some kind of magnification device, you can see it. And if it's that simple and you can fix it, great. And then you don't have to return it or deal with any of this stuff. But if you are doing it on a lot of different pens and you like to check out, you got a whole collection you want to do it, it can be handy to get some of these tools. So if you do the alignment and the tines look great and it's still writing scratchy, then you might need a little bit of micro mesh. And that's when I like to just kind of go and hold the pen in your normal hand situation, do a few small figure eights, and then write with it again and try it. And I always like to do it inked up too. You can do it dry, but it's better inked up because that's going to reflect how it's actually going to write. So put a little ink in there, and it's okay to do the inked up pen on the micro mesh. That's why I have, a figure eight here that looks kind of inky on this particular one. So you just do a couple swirls on there, and then you write on the paper and see if it feels any better. Do a couple swirls, see if it writes any better. If it's writing in one particular direction, and you can kind of do that too. Just do some like X's and some hash marks, and if you feel like it's dragging when I go from the top right to the bottom left, and that's the only place it's dragging, just do that motion lightly on the micro mesh, and it'll kind of fix that, kind of rub that out. This is a very, very fine abrasive. It almost feels like leather to your fingers. Very, very fine abrasive. It's 12,000 grit. So if you are doing some figure eights on this, it's gonna be very delicate. So it's hard to really overdo it on this 12,000 grit micro mesh. It can be done, but it's, keep a light touch. Just use the weight of the pen. Don't press down when you're doing it, but just keep the weight of the pen and just kind of, go do a few figure eights and then do a little bit on the paper and see if it feels any better. If it's still kind of scratching in one direction, scratch it a little bit in that same way on the micro mesh, and then try it again, and just kind of keep going back and forth until it feels really good to you. It's kind of hard to overdo it. And honestly, with a Jinhao like this, the pens are so inexpensive that these are really good ones to try this kind of thing out with, because worst case, if you completely ruin it, you're not out that much, okay? But if you don't want to mess around with any of this stuff, you don't want to do any kind of tinkering or anything, you know, I understand it's not for everybody, and you buy the pen from gouletpens.com and it's just not working right, I would recommend trying the tine alignment thing, because literally you saw how long that took me, 5 seconds to fix. And then once that's fine, that will fix like 90% of the problems. So it's not worth even going through the hassle of returning or doing emails or anything like that back and forth. If you can fix that on your own, that right there will fix most of your pen issues. However, if that's not doing it and you don't want to deal with any of this other stuff, email us, let us know, info@gouletpens.com. We're happy to help you out. Or returns@gouletpens.com. That's the one that will ultimately end up going to. And we got a great team that'll help troubleshoot it, or that will swap it out for you or give you a credit or whatever makes sense in your given situation. It does happen with these Jinhaos from time to time, but it's definitely not like, oh, well, if you buy one, it's 50% chance it's going to be a bum nib. It's really not like that at all. Most of them are actually pretty decent. And honestly, the reason we carry these is because they are so affordable, but part of the reason we carry them too is because they take a number 6 nib. You can pull the nib right out of there and you can swap it with a Goulet nib. That's like most of the reason why we carry these pens, is because they're very affordable. They got some cool finishes on them. The nibs are very satisfactory for the price, but they only come in a medium nib anyway, so you can get a Goulet nib in anything from an extra fine to a 1.5. So you got lots of options there. I know a lot of people that do that and they say it's their favorite pen. Well, that's it for this week. So I hope you enjoyed this one. I do have a question of the week for you this week, kind of playing off a question from the middle of the pack here. How do you strike up a conversation with a fellow fountain pen user if you don't know them? Or, I'll flip it around, how has anyone ever approached you if you're using fountain pens in public? How did that conversation go? I'm curious to know. Seems kind of cool. So there you go. That's a question of the week for this week. So go ahead and put that on the YouTube or on the blog. I'd be curious to hear your story about that. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you like this video. We're like rounding 28,000 subscribers now, which just blows my mind, because that's like more people that go to Virginia Tech, the university I went to, which is pretty large. So just to think like there's that many people out there that like this enough to want more. So that's kind of cool. So I don't know, it's neat to hit little milestones like that. So that's kind of cool. So that's it for this week. Be sure to check out gouletpens.com for any of the stuff that I've talked about here. Check out the blog if you want like hyperlinks. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you go to the blog, you can see hyperlinks and a lot of other things, you know, that will have more detail and direct links and stuff like that we can't do as easily on YouTube. That's it for now. I will see you next week. I hope you have a great weekend and the great rest of your week. And as always, right on.